we were in the kitchen. I remember it vividly. We were standing by the island, and my wife just looked at me. She said, "I don't want to be married anymore. I want a divorce. This is too hard." And I thought, what's so stinking hard about it? I didn't understand her perspective. I just had an overwhelming sensation of it can't be my way anymore, right? If I really want something different, I got to give up and surrender to the process.
Welcome to Veteran Voices SITREP with your hosts Tom and Chris Faust.
Welcome to Veteran Voices. I am your co-host, Tom Faust. I'm here with my son, Chris. And today we have with us Alex Johnson. He's a combat veteran who will be talking through a number of issues that he's gone through trying to transition from the PTSD problems into a counselor's office and totally surrendering and where he ended up now. So says he's an open book. A lot of alcohol involved that I think you've taken care of and moved on and surrendered. And so let's just go in and get started here. I think you talked about, I think something that had an effect on you was a friend of yours that called asking for some money because he ran out of his VA budget. And you, I guess, had something to say before you actually gave him the money to, help him out a little bit. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the processes I've learned with partnering with the right people and people showing up for me and stuff was how to, instead of just giving money away or lending money, thinking of it as a hand up. How do you assist somebody to empower them to their next destination, to their next goal, right? So in that conversation, he was my alpha team leader in Iraq, and he's probably one of the best men I know. But he was, we haven't spoken years. So it was one of those things. We touched base, and then about a week later, he was asking, needing $50, what have you. And it was impactful because we spent about 15, 20 minutes just empowering him, right? Just reminding him of the greatness that he is, right? He still exists in that greatness of space. And by the time it was all said and done, the $50, I told him, I said, if it comes back, great. If it doesn't, no problem. Don't make it be a relationship aspect between you and me. But yeah, sure enough, since we've talked about that, Tom, he's already paid it back and good and moving on and excited and cleaning up, what he wants to do as far as his next goals and his next steps. And so I think that's part of the community of us veterans, as we sit around in a room, how do we empower one another? We all possess such great attributes. Selfless service is obviously something we all have it in us, whether we love it or not, or whether it resonates every day or not, we have it, so why not share it, empower it with each other? And that was a big deal for him and I to be able to reconnect and be able to serve one another still in that capacity.
Look at some interview notes here. You mentioned that he still wanted to call you Sergeant Johnson, and you told him that you're just Alex now. What does that reveal about the whole of the old identity for both of you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think for a while I did latch on to that combat veteran, that infantryman that I am, that warrior. And as I started to move on and leave the military aspects, which I know Tom wanted to talk about a little bit more in detail too as we get there, but being able to realize it was a point in time for me. It was one of the building blocks of why I'm at where I'm at today. And so being able to go back when he called me Sergeant Johnson, I think it was out of respect and love, right? I think that's how he was trying to talk to me. So I was reassuring him he gets the new version. He gets the improved, upgraded version, which is now Alex, who's done some work. Not to say that I was bad as a warrior. I'm not saying that it's a negative thing, but it is the next milestone of where I'm going to, my next destiny, right? And so simply just being Alex is what I love to be now, I don't have to be that lack of a better, I don't have to be a gunslinger anymore. Right. So.
Yeah. So, and you described this alpha team leader, I'm guessing it's the same guy that we were just talking about, as the guy who walked on every bomb first, got shot at first. He was always out there What do you think that says about the culture of the unit altogether, and what you each valued in each other?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's we did a few missions with SOCOM, Special Operations Command, and they couldn't believe our 15-month op tempo. We were there during the 0708 Bush's Surge Brigade, and in Iraq, and it was 72 hours nonstop. I mean, very little sleep, very little chow. And I will tell you, we were a young platoon, young platoon leader, young platoon sergeant. I was 23 as the E6 squad leader, so young squad leaders, and we were dynamic. We truly all fought for one another, and did our best to keep each other alive, and there was no doubt about it, but yeah, my alpha team leader, I was the first squad leader, so he was alpha team leader, so he ran point about 90% of the time. So first fire, first bombs, first everything, he took it all, and he never complained. Not once did he ever complain to mix it up or change it up, or let's change my odds a little bit, right? And he never said it. He just kept doing it and just kept being amazing at it. So yeah, I have nothing but just complete love and respect for him.
You have said, that we were servants. Most of us in the military, we're serving our country. So yeah, that is true in one aspect there. So how do you understand the word, or how did you understand the word servant back then? Was it about obedience, sacrifice, and leadership, or was it something else to you?
Yeah, so servant, man, going back years here in time, what I thought about it back then is not what I understand it today. So going back then, it was a job to do, and it was my job to serve. So it was like a compensation aspect where I'll serve, I'll do what I'm told to do, and be respectful of that. And in turn, you're going to pay me a little bit of money here, and we're going to go ahead and do this. And the goal is to protect America, right? So that's kind of how I understood servitude, if you will. Now, if you want me to morph into what I think it is today, I think it's a whole different animal. But
so you mentioned that some soldiers move into leadership, and I think you kind of used air quotes when we talked earlier. It's more than abundant service. When did you first feel that shift from just doing your job to I'm responsible for people's lives here?
So I would definitely say in basic training, I had a drill sergeant who was phenomenal. It was his last cycle. Phenomenal human being. And I remember seeing that rank as staff sergeant, and I was a private, brand new E1 private. And I thought, man, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that right now. I want to emulate those footsteps. And his leadership was, second to none. He was top notch. Little did I know his leadership was so good because of the servant that he was to us, but I didn't correlate it at that time, right? I just saw the leader in him. I saw the rank, and I saw how he treated us. And I thought, man, I want to do that. So, 4 years later, there I am as a staff sergeant, trying to re-emulate what I remember him doing, obviously with the Sergeant Johnson flavor to it, as we all do. But I'll definitely tell you, yeah, I would definitely say going from basic training to airborne school, going to RIP, being a ranger, I mean, that's it right there. They're going to teach you. It doesn't matter if you're an E1 or if you're the highest rank, you're a leader. Next man up type mentality. And I think that's where it really started to hone in on me, probably 18, 19 years old. Might even been leadership even back as a child with my siblings, my 6 siblings. There were some taxing things that are going on in life too that I think, unbeknownst to me, was leadership was happening. I just didn't know what it was.
Kind of going in a little bit of a different direction here, and I know we don't want to, we don't have to kind of dwell on, on anyone's subject, but one of the big things with transitioning out of the military is when you leave it, you lose you lose that structure, that accountability and camaraderie and everything that you had while you were in there, to now you're, kind of on your own, or, with family, and it's just not quite the exact same. And that can lead to a lot of, issues with coping with things. So kind of how did that work for you? Was it like a slow slide? Was it kind of an instant thing? Kind of explain what you feel you can about how it affected you.
So yes, when I retired from the military, I was grateful. I was happy to leave some of that structure aspect, as some of it's not always the fun structure that we enjoy as veterans, but there was something about the simplicity of the brotherhood, the acceptance of the brotherhood, and leaving the military, I quickly was immersed with another veteran partner of mine, and we were doing home building. So I still had some camaraderie there, right? Pretty daily interaction. But once I left that, I knew I needed to focus on my family. At that point, I knew there was a gap, there was a hole, and I didn't know how to do it. That was the key. I didn't know how, and so that's when it started to evolve to alcohol. I thought I was checking the box by being physically present. I'm standing in the same room as them. What's the problem? I'm here, right? But I didn't understand at that point the emotional availability to them, the mental agility to support them, so on and so forth. And I think that's where, like Tom was saying, we'll probably move into it here shortly, but something had to change, and so alcohol was the pacifier to the thoughts, if you will.
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of explained to us a little bit about what it was like for you. Kind of, you were there, but not really there.
Right.
So I just want to say, at one point, you were married for like 13 years, and your wife said she wanted a divorce, and that kind of woke you up a little bit, I think, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So, in my drinking from about 8 a.m. in my coffee with Crown Royal and going through the day with the whole rest of the bottle, we were in the kitchen. I remember it vividly. We were standing by the island, and my wife just looked at me. She said, "I don't want to be married anymore. I want a divorce. This is too hard." And I thought, what's so stinking hard about it? Like I didn't understand her perspective. It was actually threw me for a loop, because here I am. I'm in the house. I'm here. I'll mow the grass or whatever needs to be done or whatever. But what's the problem? And then we really had to get down on the nuts and bolts. And in that process, my best friend from high school is still my best friend today. He was helping my wife with some health stuff and stuff like that. And so, he'd call me a little bit previous to when my wife said that, and was basically trying to encourage me to, be the best version of myself that I am. And so, like I said, I was still kind of dumbfounded. My wife's over here trying to better herself a little bit, but I'm home. I'm doing everything I think I'm supposed to be doing, but it wasn't enough. And so, yeah, that was definitely an eye opener, thinking I'm checking every box and doing all the right things. And little did I know I was not on the right path. And honestly, looking back, we just had our 19-year anniversary on the 6th of January. So that has transpired. But from 13 to 19, a lot of things have changed and developed, right? So,
So your friend that's been your friend since high school and everything, what kind of, like, I see here that, he, told you that you were an impactful person and that, you're swallowing it down with booze. When he said things like that, did you feel called out? Did you feel seen, or did it is that what really lit that fire that something needs to change?
So I'll be real clear here exactly how that conversation went. And it was probably one of the most pivotal conversations, that moment, that I needed to hear. And he said, "Hey, Alex," he goes, "you're my best friend." He's like, I love you to death. And I did kind of tell him, I really appreciate watching him on Facebook and being around him with his sons and how he is as a father and all that stuff. And he literally said these words. He said, "Quit being a pussy and get your shit together." He said, "It's time. It's time to grab the bull by the horns. It's time to ride into where you're supposed to be going." And man, that was clear. He's a veteran himself too. That was as clear as it gets, and coming from him, because he was living a life that looked desirable as far as the fatherhood and stuff. It really resonated at that moment. It really rung a bell. So,
you said sometimes just being real with one another, being able to hold the line is something. What does holding the line look like in a friendship, do you think?
It's
an example.
Boundaries and brotherhood. And what I mean by that is, we all have boundaries. We some of them are known boundaries. Some of them are the unwritten boundaries, where you can see a brother such as myself that was, moving to a less than desirable place, is what it probably looked like from his foxhole, and being able just to say what it is, be real and be bold about it, and know that the person that you are having this discussion with has the aptitude to being willing to accept what you're saying, not out of malice, not out of anger, not out of upsetness, but out of pure love. He said that out of love. There was no anger, upsetness about it. He was just trying to say, hey, this is the time, this moment right here is the time. And it really, like I said, it really woke me up. And so going back to your question, Tom, I'm talking about what does it truly mean to have that brotherhood or that accountability? It comes without judgment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
That confrontation there that, that lit that fire, where he, said, hey, you need to change this here. Those confrontations, kind of looked like they pushed you towards something that, most veterans and probably a lot of people hate is, surrendering. And you had mentioned that you didn't just surrender, you laid face down on the therapist's floor. So walk us through that, that first session, or kind of like how that came about, where like, okay, I really need to change, and this is it.
Let me find the right words here. So during that time, I thought my way was the right way. I thought I had it figured out. I thought, been to combat, I've led the troops, done all these things, I don't want to be told how to do it anymore. I'm gonna do it my way. And I was talking to a different therapist, and she wasn't a full-time therapist or anything like that. She was a resource to try to help partner vets with resources. And I told her, I said, if I'm ever going to go see a therapist, it's not going to be a female, right? They don't want to hear my gory war stuff. I don't want to talk to anybody that was prior service in the military. I just don't want to do any of that. She's like, oh, I got just the right person for you. So she linked me up with this therapist, and, I drove there, and, it was about 45 minutes from my house, and I was thinking, all right, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see what happens, right? It was that standoffish, still kind of, this isn't for me, sort of thing. Is this weakness, right? Had all those thoughts. I went through all those feelings and emotions, all the things that you're kind of conditioned to believe that's the opposite of just suck it up and drive on, right? And so I got there and I checked in receptionist, and they said, yep, you can go down to the doctor's office, and walked down to the doctor's office, knocked on the door, and sure enough, female. And then I look on her wall, and she was Marine Corps officer. And I knew at that point, I was like, I got to give up. I've been telling everybody how this world's going to go and how I want to shape it. And it's got to be my way and this and that. And somebody finally got me. Somebody finally figured out what it was. And so at that moment, I just had an overwhelming sensation of, it can't be my way anymore. Right. If I really want something different, I got to give up and surrender to the process. And I literally just walked in the office and laid on the floor, and I said, whatever you need, doctor. I want change. I need to change. I was like, this is not what I wanted, but obviously it's what I need. And she said, I've never had anybody walk in so willing and so freely ready to change. And so I will say that hour after I got in the chair, it was high octane, and I was exhausted. I walked out of there, and I spoke with her the next day, and I told her, I said, I don't want to do that anymore. And she said, hey, Alex, I'll match you wherever you're at. You want to come in here and you're firing, I'll match you firing. If you want to come in here and do it a different way, I'll match you there too. And so she was the energy that I needed for that time in my life. And I'll tell you what, the 3 years of working with her was powerful, very powerful.
And she told you that she never really had a vet give up like that before, I guess, huh?
No, yeah, I think she was taken back, to be quite honest. And I think it was just, sometimes we try to guide our lives exactly how we want it to be. It's got to be this way or not this way, or this or that, or it's an off and on switch type mentality, right? Back then I was closed and defensive to everything, right? I wasn't open and curious to what was in front of me. It was off or on switch type mentality. And so when I got pushed in that way, something told me it's not your way. You got to see it. You got to see it from other avenues. You got to see different things. And so, like I said, yeah, it was unique. I don't know why I did it that way, but I almost just felt like my feet got taken out from underneath me, I said what I wanted. I laid the ground rules, and it didn't go any way like I wanted. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just kind of you don't know how, so you're just kind of like, all right, here it is. Help, give me something that definitely, something you can rise to the challenge to. It gives you encouragement. So kind of going on that, you'd mentioned that you had, did 3 years or more of counseling. For the vet listening who thinks, counseling is for weakness, counseling is for weak people. What is something you learned in therapy that you probably think you couldn't have learned alone, or just, just with your buddies?
You got to be, I want to say that the soil's got to be fertile. And what I mean by that, it's got to be watered. It's got to be able to plant the seeds in it so they can be nurtured and they can grow. If you're trying to put seeds in the Sahara Desert, your chances of them germinating and growing are slim to none, or maybe the next time it rains if you're lucky. So what I would say is that there comes a time, I think we all kind of reach that point, and I can't tell you what day it's going to be, but there comes a time when the brain starts to wanting to be open to potential growth or change or personal development. And for me, it just happened to be in that moment, right? That moment in time. I would definitely say the ground probably became more fertile with me when my wife told me, she didn't want to party anymore. What the heck, so I think that's probably when my desert, my ground started to get a little bit of water on it, and started to realize, okay, there's more here. Right. And then the seeds, right, that got planted, I really did. I stewarded them well. I took care of them. I pulled the weeds and took care of the garden. And I really started to invest in that. I would definitely say the hardest thing I've ever done in my life wasn't war, wasn't fatherhood. It was self-development. It was mindset changes. It was growth inside myself. It was being able to sit alone in a room and be able to think in clarity and not have to worry about all the demons that, have those discussions with you when, veterans don't want to be alone. We still want that community. And so going through that process, how does a vet get there? I think a vet really needs to evaluate where they're at, where they want to go, and are they open for that counseling? Otherwise, I feel like I've had some fellow brothers do it and they didn't have the same outcome. And that was my question to them. Were you open and curious, and was the ground fertile for seeds to be planted? Or did we just fly an airplane across with some seeds in it across the Sahara Desert and hope that something was going to take? Hope's never a course of action. We all know that in this room, but you got to have a plan. And I think being open to it is the first step to saying, if I'm willing to be open to this time, this hour I'll spend with a therapist, I want to get something from it. That's the first step. If that's the mindset, you'll probably have a pretty good outcome. But there is something to finding the right therapist that's going to meet you where you're at. Not everything's cookie cutter with us. Chris, how you think and how Tom thinks and how I think and our different experiences and what's PTSD to you, to me, to so on and so forth. There's so many variables. So I think sometimes, for a lack of better words, you got to kind of shop around until you find the person that's going to meet you where you're at. So
I like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you said one of your favorite topics is consciousness, not being reactive or in an emotional state, but proactive, right? And so, like in plain language, what does that really look like in your daily life?
So, in working with my best friend there, right, started seeking some health opportunities that he was doing in life and stuff, and so was his family. So as I started to get mentally healthier, I needed to get physically healthier. They kind of went hand in hand, if you will. And during that time, in that entrepreneurship, if you will, they had resources towards conscious leadership, like the different books and stuff like that. At that time, I don't read books. I don't write. I don't, all these things that I don't do. Right. I wasn't going to do them. And I started opening my eyes after doing some counseling. Yeah, I'd do some reading and some writing, some interactiveness and stuff, some homework, if you will. Started realizing, okay, there is some value here. And so working inside that company, I had the luxury of meeting Jim Dethmer, and he's a conscious leader, does conscious leadership. And was specifically doing it for a group inside that company and that entrepreneurship company. And that was it. I mean, within the first hour of being in his presence and hearing how his mind works, I thought, this is what I need to be doing. This is the key. And I think from being open and curious now and being able to see any opportunity that comes at me, I don't look at it as a off on switch. I look at it as, okay, what value is it here? Right? That's my question. What value is it? Not, I'm not going to do it, or yes, I will do it. It's a, is it a full body yes type mentality? And so working with Jim and seeing what he offered and seeing how he lives and seeing how he interacted with his wife up on stage. And it was a small group, I know 200 of us, so it was intimate-ish enough. And then he started going through some practical exercises with us. And I realized how simple it was. Like, I feel like I've made life so complicated when it's really just so simple. And he was breaking it down in systematic steps that you could actually achieve things. And yeah, that was it. I told my best friend at that time, I said, maybe this is what I was built for, is consciousness. Instead of living in that limbic system of the fright, fight, freeze, or faint, constantly survival mode. What if I move out of survival mode and I move into consciousness and I use my prefrontal cortex? What if I use this area? I work on working out, right? Because I want my physique to look good. But how much time do I spend working out here? I wasn't spending a lot of time there. And I started devoting more time to that consciousness arena. And I'm going to tell you what, it was a game changer, full blown game changer. So,
yeah, you definitely want to have to change in order to have any sort of meaningful impact on what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes it just takes somebody saying the right thing that clicks with your brain to be like, oh, that makes so much sense. So is there a moment where, as you're going through and learning this, is there a moment where you caught yourself mid-reaction and thought, oh, this is the old pattern, that this is the old me, what did you do in the moment to switch from reaction to the consciousness part of it?
So I'm glad you asked that. So as we've worked through consciousness and some of Jim's stuff, I say we, I'm talking my wife and my kids, my daughters, my two daughters. We have an agreement and a commitment with one another that we are allowed to ask one another if we're in that conscious state or if we're in that reactionary emotional state, if that makes sense. Now, we don't judge each other or guess what one somebody's communicating in. We simply ask that question. And so my wife and I, as the leaders of our house together here, she can see patterns and she sees things and trends because she's lived with me for so long. So she'll just simply ask me, is everything all right? And she's not saying it in a manner of negativity. What she's trying to do is help my brain move back out of that emotional state and come back into consciousness. And simply doing that takes about 2 to 3 seconds for it to kind of freeze your brain. You're like, oh, and then you move back into consciousness. And it's such an easy exercise. And it's not hurtful. It's not mean. It's not anything. It's just simply asking the question. And so since we have that commitment, we have the same thing with our daughters. Simply ask them to go clean their room. And sometimes you get a reaction of, and it's like, whoa, okay. So you just pause as a dad or pause as the mom. And I just simply ask, was that an emotional or conscious comment response? And then they go, oh, actually, Dad, can I have 10 more minutes to finish up what I was doing before I go clean my room? Yes, absolutely. Just that alone has changed the whole dynamic in the house. There's no yelling and screaming in my house. There's no freaking out in my house. There's literally one rule in my house. It's to love one another. There's no other rules we have. Everything comes back to that point. But simply being able to communicate with each other in that way has allowed us to, when you do start to digress, to come back to where we want to be going. So
I want to shift just a little bit, but kind of related to what you were just talking about, into what you call your big three. Spirituality, your wife, and your kids are non-negotiables. How did you arrive at that? I mean, maybe it's kind of obvious, but how did you arrive at that? And were they always in that order?
Perfect. So I'm glad you asked that question. That's a wonderful question. So kind of tying back to what Chris was saying too, is how do you keep the main thing, Alex, from folding, from going backwards or digressing, if you will, to certain areas of your life? And once again, my best friend said, until you get real rigid on what's important to you, then nothing's important to you, right? If everything gets 1%, that's still an F. What gets an A? So during my therapy aspect, I I don't know that I was ever told it, but I felt it. I could understand it, that there was something much bigger than me. There was something much bigger than just my platoon. And that's when my spirituality, I think, really started to skyrocket. And I started searching for, okay, what is it? So I spent more time in that wheelhouse. And then as the time I devoted, anywhere from 1 minute to 30 minutes, morning, evening, in my spirituality, I started to realize how powerful it was. And I started to, spirituality, people can whatever is going to take it for you and move it to the next level is what I encourage you to do. But for my spirituality, it just happened to be Christianity. And so when I was looking at it, it was, if God is the father and I want to go in heaven, right? And I am a father to these daughters, how does he treat me and how am I treating them? How am I treating my wife, right? And so I started to go, oh, so this is how it has to go. And for me is I need to work on that relationship with dad, God, right? And then if I work there, that will work through me into the relationship with my wife. And in that relationship with my wife, we will both be in unity towards raising the kids. So once I really studied and figured out those were the three that have to be touched every day. Nothing can get in the way of that. Those have to hit A's 100% each and every day. Everything else after that becomes gravy. Everything else after that. And then what I also realized is I don't have stress anymore. When I take care of the three most important things to me, what I'm focused on, anything that is a hiccup doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It seems easy to navigate the obstacles throughout the day. So that's something else I would really encourage too, Chris, when I'm talking to people is, what's important to you? What are your three non-negotiables? And until you can root yourself in them, it's kind of like you're on a boat without a sail. Where are you going? You don't know. And so it can be uncharted waters, if you will, or uncharted waters, if you will. So
nice. Yeah, that's really good that, all these things, lean toward it. Yeah, you got to take care of yourself first. That's always number one. I mean, how can you look after others and help others if you can't help yourself first? So that's definitely a really good mentality to have. That's one of the reasons why we do this podcast is, we're trying to help others too.
And that's the hardest thing I've ever done, Chris, is take care of me, right? That's not what we're always asked to do. So
yeah, it's like, and a lot of the people that we talk to, we get, even we get information that we weren't, fully sure in the first place when we started talking with somebody, and then something clicks in our brain. So, helping us help each other, it's the only way we're going to get through the world as it gets more crazy as we go on is just, we got to be there for each other however we can. So kind of going along that line, you had mentioned that, without goals, you drifted into alcohol, but with goals, even something as small as, making your bed, was helping you thrive. What is your connection between goals and staying out of the bottle?
Between goals and what?
Staying out of the bottle.
Oh, staying out of the bottle. So there's a book, and I'm blanking at the moment, but essentially the aspect of the book was a British row team for the Olympics, and everything they did came back to, does this make our boat go faster? So any decision they made, they correlated it back to a goal. And so when I think of booze, or when I think of alcohol, or I think of any vice, to be honest, I have to assess it. Does it help my spirituality? Does it help my closeness with my wife? Does it help with closeness with my daughters? And I'm going to tell you what, alcohol has never helped at any of those three. And it still doesn't to this day. Have I been able to now, after I've been, I went about 26 months, I went no alcohol, just completely dry. And this was many years ago, but it's so fantastic now, because that mindset of, does this help facilitate my big three? Does it support my goals? I can simply have a single beer to watch the Seahawks last night with my brother and be done. I'm in control again. And it's because I'm in control. It's because I have the goal. And I know, did that simple beer hurt my relationship with my brother? Nope. Is he a military vet? Yep. Combat vet too? Yep. Does he enjoy a single beer as well? He does. And we had a single, and that was it. Single beer. And then drank water and enjoyed the Seahawks destroying the Niners. We had a blast, right? Sorry if there's Niner fans, but
you got two Seahawk fans here. So
okay. So with that, it was just one of those things that it's like being able to realize that I am the architect of my life. I do get to set it up the way I want. I do get to live in each moment and be present and intentional in each thing that I choose to do. That's huge. It's massive. Being able to free yourself to realize that you are the architect, you are the guide in that moment is massive. I think as a veteran, we do get sometimes tied around to the routine, the bosses. We shape and mold. Both you being prior military, if I would ask you at 5 o'clock in the morning for physical exercise or 9 a.m. in the morning physical exercise, which one sounds better? I think all three of us would say 9 o'clock all day long. But you don't get to be the architect. You kind of do what you're told to the model, right? And so once you kind of relinquish that, and now you are in charge, it's freeing. Can be scary, but it's freeing once you realize what the goals are that tie behind that aspect of your life. So I think that's what really, I mean, at the end of the day, alcohol doesn't control me anymore. Some of the other vices I had, they don't control. They just don't.
So somebody told you that you were born a Ferrari, but you like to compare yourself to Pintos, you said.
Yeah.
And then you switched to a Mario Kart analogy. Can you tell us a little more about that?
So I'm an avid racer. I've raced motorcycles and anything that has wheels and an engine, I'll race it. And this was my old business partner when I got out of the military, vet friend of mine. And he was a great stepping stone too, to start trying to open up some of the doors here, some of the pathways in my brain. And in the military, it's, who got the highest PT score, physical training score, who shot the best, who can run the fastest. It was always a competitive type aspect. And, he was in a unit with me and stuff, so he got to see that competitiveness in me. But once we left the military, he told me, he said, you're always comparing yourself and racing Pintos. He said, you're a Ferrari, man. You were born the best. Like, I can see it in you. I love everything about you. He said, but when you're trying to race people to win, there's more to you than that. And then he simply brought up Mario Kart. He's like, you've played Mario Kart? Yeah. He's like, well, if you're a Ferrari and you can run the lap in 60 seconds, why aren't you competing it to get it down to 59 seconds instead of just beating the Pintos that are doing 1:05 all the time? You're always winning. That's great. But what if you started to compare yourself? What if you started to leverage your ability to be faster as the ghost car? So you're beating your ghost car every day, 1% better. And that analogy really set in with me quite well because it was a racing model, right? And so then I started realizing it doesn't matter how fast Chris and Tom can run. How fast am I running today? And what can I do tomorrow to be faster for myself? I think that's a big transition from the military mindset, where everything is performance-based, usually out of a peer group, if you will. So,
yeah.
So you just mentioned that, because of this mindset that you stopped comparing yourself to others and only compare yourself to you. Is there an area where you're still tempted to, kind of look sideways and compare?
Oh, yeah. By the way, I'm still human. I want to let you guys know I'm still human. I still have my flaws, right? Or not even flaws. They're not flaws. They're moments of, I would say, probably lack of consciousness where I digress. And of course, I mean, even, right now I do a project management job for a company that does architectural engineering work for VA hospitals around the nation here. So, probably just last week alone, I would say I probably compared myself to another project manager. How many projects do they have versus how many projects do I have? How much work are they doing versus how much work am I doing? Why does it matter? Right. So in that moment, I digress because I want to compare, right? I want there to be some apples to apples here when really it didn't matter. And really the thought was probably a loss of 1.5 minutes of my life that I won't get back. It's part of that history book. So giving you just kind of a tangible, something that I was just thinking of that would be recent, that's probably an area where I was comparing or competing and it has no value. There was no value add to my life. So going back to it, what, the other way to think about it is what are my projects and how can I do better at them? Or how can Alex do better tomorrow inside those areas that he wasn't doing today and just move it 1% better? as people say, if you do 1% better each day, that's what 365% over a year. That's quite a milestone, So one push-up today might be 2 tomorrow. 365 in a setting would be quite a show, right? And it's doable. It's that consistency and staying in that space. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, and then always, even back to what you were talking about a minute ago, always compare yourself with yourself, your previous self, as you do that 1% better each day. 'Cause comparing to somebody else usually just ends in frustration. So you don't need that.
100%. Yeah, I guess I don't know if I ever brought this up, but expectations. I don't have expectations for my wife to make me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I did back years and years ago, and sometimes when she was sick, I was let down because I had to go do it myself. I had an expectation she was going to do it, and once I realized that she just does it out of love and kindness, she doesn't do it because of expectation. I don't do things for her because she expects me to do them. I do them because I love her. We're a team, right? And so once I started to think like that, it started to really help with relationships, because when you do things out of selfless service or out of being a servant, that really does show over time what the true value system really is of you or of who you are. So,
and so for the veteran who feels like they used to be a Ferrari when they were in the military, and now they're feel more like the Pinto in civilian life, what would you tell them to for that first lap to get them started moving in the right direction?
I'm gonna tell you, I've yet to find a veteran that's still not a Ferrari. That's first and foremost. We don't digress. We're not worse. We're actually more equipped. We're actually special in a certain way that still makes them be the Ferrari that they are, unless they've chose their mindset to be a Pinto. So simply just looking back and realizing how far you've came is so wonderful. And if you take that and realize where you want to go, you're still a Ferrari. You're not the Pinto. So if any veteran hears me, you are a Ferrari. You're not a Pinto, no matter what. And you gotta understand that you have a different ability to do things that most people haven't or won't do.
That actually transitions really well to what I wanted to mention, is that one big thing that you had mentioned, if you're a veteran, you're a Ferrari, but part of that is accountability. So underneath all this, mental and spiritual work is, veterans like accountability. That's what that's what we need. We need it. We want it. But some can kind of feel like they lose it when they leave the service. So you've said that you don't care if, somebody's a homeless vet or living in the Taj Mahal. If you're a vet, accountability is one of those things we do. What does healthy accountability between veterans look like today?
I mean, simply, it's funny. My veteran buddies right now are texting me because there's a stinking football game on, right? And that's something that they enjoy. I don't care to, I would rather spend time doing this than watching a football game, but it's something that they love, and I can appreciate that. But simply being bold enough to pick up the phone. You got to be able to pick up the phone. When I saw that Alpha team leader pop back up on, Facebook or what have you, I think he had a 4 or 5 year hiatus. I saw him there, and I literally just hit the messenger button and call. Yeah, I didn't know if he was going to pick up. I didn't know if he's mad. I have no clue, but it's simply accountability is doing it fearless. Call that person, follow up with somebody, ask them how they're doing, and be quiet and listen. They're going to leave clues, right? Clues are all over the place. It's up to you to listen. And so I guess for me, probably in my personality and kind of where I'm at in my life today, I feel like maybe a sliver of responsibility. It's not, not my top 3 priority, but it is in that priority arena for me to touch base with some of these fellas and just ask them, how the heck are you doing? Usually by the second or third call, they're telling you some pretty meaningful things, and I feel like we're still working on myself, obviously, to this moment, and I won't ever stop, but being able to simply give them 15 to 20 minutes of that brotherhood, that accountability, and going back to being real about accountability, right? Don't sugarcoat it. If they're saying they're drinking every day, don't celebrate it if that's not what they want to be doing. If they want something different, but they're telling you they're drinking every day, well, back to what my best friend said to me, right? I won't say it again, but you know what I'm saying? Being pointed about it and telling them how, you know, what they need to hear. I think that's part of accountability. But yeah, don't be scared to pick up the phone, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like you're a number of people in your previous military life still contact you, like you just said about the football game. The conversations start out surface level, but yeah, you get to the hard stuff eventually. You really want to help make sure that they're doing well.
Yeah, you definitely being intentional with the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so is like, what's one question that you might wish that veterans would ask each other more often when they do have these conversations, you know, other than, you know, hey, how you doing, brother? You know, what's a good way to get deeper with somebody that you know probably needs to talk a little more?
I love to ask them what the next 30 days has in store. You know, let's map it out. What are you going to do tomorrow? Just and then just shut up, right? Because sometimes there's going to be that awkward lull, that 1 minute of no conversation that felt like an hour, but it starts getting their brains to turn. And I think once you start opening up people's brains, right, the most powerful thing I believe we have on this earth is what's right here. Getting those juices to start flowing and then start encouraging it. Well, I want to get back to the gym tomorrow. What does that look like to you? What gym you going to? Dive in a little bit deeper, get a little bit more details, start making it, that conversation turn into a reality, right? Start mapping it out well enough where somebody could see it through. Those are the conversations I love to have with my veteran brothers, you know. I don't let them be surface level. You know, we could talk about football for a couple minutes. I'm fine with that. Yep. Bo Nix broke his ankle. Okay. We can talk about all that stuff, but what are you doing tomorrow? What's Monday look like for you? Do you got the day off? Really starts to morph into conversations and substance, right? Which then comes back to follow up, right? You know, we could sit here and build a relationship, but if I never follow back up with you and ask you how last week went and did we hit the goals, or you know, what did you end up accomplishing, and then celebrating those little wins, right? Because little wins always lead to the big ones. That's kind of the service that I still see today. You know, if you want to say what's the version of Sergeant Johnson, that's the Sergeant Johnson that people get now, is that version of growth and trying to empower people to see where they want to go and then support them. I mean, I don't give them money to support them necessarily, but just sometimes energy, just the energy that we have, because we all wake up with 100% each day. Being able to give 1 or 2% of that each, you know, couple times a week to a couple people is sometimes enough that shifts the whole mechanism for them, i.e. at my best friend did it for me.
So kind of a little bit of a, you know, following up on that. So if a veteran is listening to this and realizes, you know, I don't have that. I have, you know, I just have drinking buddies. What would be your advice on them for like a first step to, you know, try and build actual camaraderie and accountability?
I mean, there's multiple different ways, but I would definitely say my peer group, my friend group has changed as I started to evolve and grow, as I started to set my boundaries of my big three. I lost some friends that said spirituality, Sky Daddy, you're giving time to Sky Daddy, you're crazy, you know, and stuff. And that's fine. You know, I still love you, but I'm going to keep going where I want to go. What's making me a better version? Oh man, you want to bring your wife with us to go party? Oh yeah, she's number 2 priority. We ain't doing wives this time. Well, I'm out. It's not a full body yes, right? So going back to that, if you just have drinking buddies and they're going to maintain drinking buddies, and that's the commitment that you guys have as a group, first thing you got to do is you got to shift to a different group. It might hurt. It might feel lonely for a second, but you know, there's 7 billion people in this world. There is a community for everyone. And being accepted as a community is one of the aspects that I feel is humanity. You know, if you have a belly button, you probably possess some desire to have community relationships. And so, you know, once again, you're the architect of your life. You can control who gets to come through your door and who doesn't, or what door you enter through or what door you don't, right? If it's the same bar, the same bar stool at the same time every day of the week, change that. Maybe just change the bar. Maybe don't sit at the bar at that bar. Sit in the booth. Say hello to somebody that comes through the door. Maybe they're not drinkers. Maybe they're there for the food. I don't know. but change what you're doing to try to get a different outcome.
So, yeah, kind of taking that back to the talking with your therapist. I guess she said there's a like a coat hook outside your front door, and you hang your cape there before you go inside. Like sort of a Superman analogy or something, right?
Yeah,
Can you tell us more about that?
absolutely. So it was probably about 4 to 6 months into the counseling. My counselor was starting to identify that my personality traits and kind of the conditioned space that I was from the military was always to fix the problems. And she gave me permission, right? She said, and I can't remember, but it must have been somewhere in and around this time, my wife wrote a letter to me and mailed it to the counselor because the counselor asked my wife to do it and asked if we were open for that to happen. And I said, of course. And I'm going to tell you what, she read that letter out loud. And then there was a part that I needed to read, and I was choked up. The stuff my wife was saying were things that I'm sure she had said to me before, but I'd never heard it. I'm sure I didn't hear it though, and so it was very emotional, right? It really, holy smokes, it kicked me in my stomach. It was hard. But as we were divulging in this, she said, Alex, I can tell your wife and your daughters, they're your team. You're not there to be their Superman. They already know you're their Superman. You don't always have to go through the door in this heroic manner trying to, fight off everything and fix everything. Just be dad, be husband, be open and available, be emotionally available. You don't have to solve it. Sometimes they just want you to listen. And she said, so do me a favor. When you get home, go to your front door, take your cape off, hang it up on the hook, and go through your front door. And I started doing that. As silly as it sounds, I was literally going through the motions as if I was doing it before I walked through the front door. And all of a sudden, I saw my family in a different way. I saw them as teammates of mine. Sure, I'm the ultimate protector if something needed to happen, but what are the chances? Slim to none. Okay, let's be realistic. Slim to none. Based off where I lived and looking at the risk analysis, if you will, was very low. But with that, I realized my family, they just wanted a dad and a husband. That's all they wanted. They didn't need some superhero. They didn't need some crazy combat that they didn't. And then it also allowed me to start telling them about my PTSD, start telling them about my military service, start telling them some of the things like, i.e. yelling in the house. My wife used to scream, time to brush your teeth, get ready for bed. And it would spike cortisol, right? And now I'm in go mode. We got to get teeth brushed. We got to get things done. And I realized that wasn't serving the household. It wasn't even serving my wife, And so we've came to that agreement that when we yell in the house, that makes dad trigger something, right? That energy. And so in this house that we live in, we don't even yell in here anymore. We talk at normal voices. If we want to go, if something needs to get done, we'll simply move to somebody wherever they're at in their location, whether it's a bedroom, and talk to them. And it's because I was transparent with them. That because of what had happened, when I hear yelling, screaming, if I see crying, things like that, those were triggers to me, which is, you can cry now because I realize I don't associate it to a brother being, dead in combat. I've realized that those are emotional things that people are allowed to express. And that usually takes about 90 seconds to process an emotion moving through consciousness, right? I've learned the art of some of this stuff, but it was something I didn't think you were allowed to share. Don't share your combat experience with your family. They don't need to hear it. Well, why not share it with them so they understand the position that, their dad or their husband's in? What's wrong with that? They don't need to necessarily know every gory detail, but maybe some of the reasons why you act a certain way and why, and being able to be open and curious in the family dynamic, because you don't have to be Superman, and being able to be vulnerable in that way really, allowed the family dynamic to grow. And it grew fast. It grew really rapidly after that too.
So what's been the hardest part about letting your family see the non-armored version of you?
I would say, I think I might've been over. I think it was the hardest part was what's going to happen. The fear of the unknown. Are they going to fear me once I tell them these stories? Will they be scared of me? Will they look different at me now? Will I look ugly to them? Right? You go through the unknown. And that's the hardest part. You put that armor, you take that armor off, you don't know. And I will tell you, laying the foundation of being able to let them maybe, and some of the stories, my wife, maybe she doesn't want any more details of that story. And that's okay for her to say, right? So being able to be in that relationship with somebody where you're committed to being able to have that boundary, where it's not saying that she doesn't want to hear it. It's saying that maybe she hit her emotional availability because what I'm sharing is taxing, and being able to pause and being okay with that part of the process. But yeah, I think that's it. Is I'm going to take my armor off. What's going to happen? I'm going to be vulnerable. What's going to happen? If you're with the right people in the right space, I think it's going to be a beautiful thing.
So if a veteran came to you today with like your Alpha team leader did, for instance, they need to begin working through something. So you mentioned your big 3 goals, the counseling, accountability, all that. If you had to put those in order, of a step-by-step for the vet to go through, how would you do that for them?
I'd say step 1 is figure out what is your non-negotiables. What are the 3 most important things to you? It might not come overnight. I think it took probably 4 to 5 weeks with my counselor. Believe it or not, and if you would ask my counselor this, when's the only time that Alex wasn't talking? It's when she asked me what was the most important thing to me. I had no clue. I ended up crying the first time she asked me that. I didn't know. I said, "Oh, I like to go fishing with the kids." She's like, "No." She's like, and she literally called me out. She said, "No, that's not it. What is it that Alex loves? What is something you love? What is something that is yours? That is non-negotiable. You know what? I think I like." And she cut me off before I gave it. She's like, "Nope." She's like, and then I froze. I realized I didn't know. I didn't know what I loved. I didn't know what I loved about myself. I didn't know what I was committed to. I didn't know what was the non-negotiables for me. And then it finally, in that conversation, I used to ride crotch rockets. And, but in that, riding crotch rockets was an adrenaline rush for me. So it fixed the junkie in me, if you will. And then we started talking about shit. Okay, so you do like engines. You do like racing. You do like, now you've said you like your family. And I do believe you do. She said, so how do we make this work? And it was probably about 7 weeks later, I sold the crotch rocket. We got 4 dirt bikes and 4 dirt bike Bluetooth headsets. And before you knew it, we're out riding in the woods. 4 dirt bikes, the 4 of us, and we were chopping it up out in nature, riding dirt bikes, doing something fun. Was I racing them? No. But I found more enjoyment being with them, doing something I enjoyed, and seeing them start to enjoy riding motorcycles. That's when she started to say, see, now you're starting to figure out what you love. Before, you were just throwing things out there to check a box with me. She's like, and I'm not going to allow you to do that. And she wasn't wrong. When I look back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, she knew the spade when she had the spade. She wasn't messing around. So I would definitely tell a step. The very first thing you need to do is find out, what do you love and what are your non-negotiables. And it might take you a year to figure it out. I don't know what the timeline is for people, and I don't want to say anything's a race. Everything's done with intention.
What would you say directly to, the spouse or a partner of a veteran who's listening to this and is thinking, that they're at that, year 13 divorce conversation?
I mean, I'm speaking from probably a combat arms type veteran, perspective, is sometimes we need an ultimatum. Sometimes we need that boot in the rear end to really wake us up. And then what we need to see is the follow through on it, right? We don't need an empty promise. We like action. And I will tell you, my wife, she's a woman of action. So I didn't take what she was saying lightheartedly. I knew what she would do, but simply being transparent. This has to change, or this is the outcome. This is the boundary. There's nothing in between. It's not up for discussion, right? Veterans, I believe we like to hear it clear. We want to know what it is. We don't want it sugar coated. We don't want to beat around the bush. Tell us what it is. And if you're a spouse out there, that's probably the best way you're going to communicate. I wouldn't necessarily say to do it when they're in a state of, if their sobriety's off. I wouldn't necessarily say that's probably not the best time to give the ultimatum, because I don't know that it's going to resonate. I can probably tell you there's years in my life that probably have forego in my memory because, well, alcohol wasn't allowing me to retain it. But that day that my wife told me I was as sober as could be that morning, and there was no shortage in what she was telling me. And so, being bold like that, I think is very helpful for a spouse, especially a military spouse or the veteran himself or herself. They need to hear it, what it is.
And so, say for somebody who's listening who wants to reach out to a vet that they're worried about, whether it's, family or a good friend, but they don't know what to say, in your opinion, kind of what's a sentence that they could borrow from you to reach out? And
well, I'll leave you with this. There's no wrong words to the right people. And I'll say it again. There's no wrong words to the right people. And what I mean by that is I have said something to somebody, whether it was a veteran friend or not, and they got offended. But then the week later, I say almost the exact same thing to somebody else, and they take it and it grew them. And they grew from it. And they loved it. And they were so grateful for it. There's no wrong words for the right person. So is there a cookie cutter copy paste that we can use for all of our veteran friends? What I would encourage you to do is spend 60 seconds in solidarity, taking time and energy to be present before you make that phone call, and simply be prepared to listen. Just simply sometimes telling somebody, I love you. Well, that's not manly. I don't care. I tell people I love them. And sometimes that's just what they needed to hear. And then pause, listen. So I don't know that there's an exact way to say this is how I would pick up the phone and call this person. What I do, and I think Tom saw me do it before we got on here. I was about 30 minutes early. I left. I sat in my quiet space. I went through my notes again, and I just asked for peace and serenity to be present in this moment with you. And were all my words going to be perfect? It was all my messages going to be clear? I don't know. But what I did ask for is to be intentional. And so, is there distractions going on in the world right now? Yeah, my dog was just on the bed trying to distract me from the intention of what I was trying to work with you guys on, right? And so I had to remove the distractions so I could come back to being intentional. So when you call those veterans, do yourself a favor and get centered in yourself and be available for the block of time that you're willing to give to that veteran that you're going to pick up the phone and call. I think it's important.
So as we're wrapping this thing up, you said that this podcast, conversations like this, they serve your spirituality, your desire to help and serve. How do you define service now compared to how you defined it when in uniform?
Perfect. That's a wonderful question. So going back to spirituality and understanding what being a servant is, right? Or what a servant looks like. The correlation to some of the best leaders in the world that I've ever had the experience to be with, they're best servants first. And what I mean by that is it's not what's in it for me. It's how can I empower you? And through the empowerment of them, of the people around them, the tide rises and all the ships are going up with it, right? So that's what I understand a leadership role now is being a servant first at your fullest capability. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily, you have a flat tire, let me just change it for you, right? So you just sit in the car, wait for me to get done with it. A different way that I understand to serve is, hey, I'll help you change the tire and I'll show you how to do it. That's the servant. The servant there is going to teach you something so you're better off when you walk away from something. The other servant is just to fix your problem, which to me was probably more of an ego, self-prophesizing task that I used to do. Is I wanted to be a servant, but I wanted to fix it because it made me feel good. In return, that person was no better off when I left them. Now being a servant is when I leave this podcast, I hope Chris and Tom are 1% better from our interaction today. I hope they got something from this. And I know I've received from you guys already. I already can feel what's going on here. So that's how I understand being a servant now versus then.
Okay. And kind of like, so final thought on, what mission are you on now? And where do you go from here to continue your impact?
Perfect. So I was just telling Tom, I got a call a couple days ago to go become Sergeant Johnson again, which hasn't happened in, I don't know, 6-7 years. But there's a volleyball team, and they were looking for some accountability, some mental toughness, some physical conditioning, some team camaraderie type aspects and chemistry. And they asked if I would do it. And so I feel like that's part of pouring back into the community. My wife and I are volleyball coaches as well. So am I going to make the next professional USA Women's Olympic national player? Probably not. The odds are probably against me. But what I can make is somebody that's conscious, a young woman that's conscious, that's a critical thinker, that's open and curious, that's not closed and defensive, that knows how to use teamwork and knows how to build people up. They might be your next president you vote for in about 30 years. I don't know. But I know I can build that. I don't know that I could build a U.S. women's national volleyball player, right? So that's kind of how I look at being a servant back into the community, taking the things I have learned, taking the military structure of leadership, style, and chemistry and camaraderie and unity and all the things. How do I employ that today, and how do I keep serving? I do it through coaching. I do it through, like you said, simply just calling a vet friend or seeing them pop back up on Facebook and not being scared. Simply clicking the button and saying hello, So that's how I feel like I still pour into the world today. The goal, the end state goal, about 10 years from now, being a conscious leader as far as doing workshops and helping people work through it in a tangible way, like Jim did for me. Carrying on that tradition or that legacy that he's already laid, that great foundation. I have a lot of work to go before I get there, but that is something that's definitely super intriguing to me, and I just love every thought about it. So,
well, I just want to thank you, Alex, for joining us and taking that cape off for us and just being the servant here, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I also want to thank everybody else for listening, tuning in, taking time away from your day to listen. Hopefully it helps out. Hopefully you got some good information, some good advice, some motivation from Alex with what he was talking about. And yeah, we really appreciate it. Hope it helps somebody. If you do enjoy the content, think somebody else might need it, like, subscribe, do what you need to get the word out to help push this information out to anybody who might need it. And yeah, we just always thank you for tuning in with us.
All right. On that, we will see you next time.
Bye.
All right.